This is what's best for both of us, Ba.
You already decided that. Some of those approvals go through me.
What are you talking about?
I didn't know.
You never asked.
Vanessa Mercer didn't raise her voice when she handed her husband the divorce papers. She didn't need to. As the newly appointed CEO of Sterling Meridian Group, she spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who believed she had already won. She told Grant Mercer he should start looking for a smaller place, something more appropriate for his situation. She even suggested a timeline for him to move out. What she didn't know was that the man she was calmly dismantling had signed off on deals worth more than her entire company just days before. And when Grant opened that envelope, he didn't look broken. He looked focused. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 2 weeks earlier, everything had still looked like a marriage worth saving. Grant Mercer had always been easy to overlook. That wasn't because he lacked presence, it was because he never demanded attention. In a world where people fought to be seen, he had built a life around staying quiet, steady, and reliable. While Vanessa chased board seats and executive titles, Grant handled everything else: the finances, the home, the endless details that made a life function. He had stepped back from full-time consulting years ago, not because he couldn't keep up, but because Vanessa's schedule had grown more demanding. Someone had to absorb the weight of everything outside her office. He had chosen to be that person. At first, she had appreciated it. Over time, she stopped noticing. The shift wasn't sudden, it came in small ways. Conversations cut short, questions left unanswered, nights where she came home too late to talk. Eventually, she stopped asking about his work entirely. And Grant, who had never needed validation, didn't push for it. That silence became the shape of their marriage. By the time Vanessa was named CEO of Sterling Meridian Group, she no longer saw him as a partner. She saw him as background. That morning, the house was quiet. Grant stood in the kitchen, finishing his coffee, reviewing a few emails on his phone. One subject line caught his attention: a follow-up from Northbridge Infrastructure Partners. He read it once, then locked his screen without replying. Not yet. He moved through the house with practiced ease, straightening things without thinking. The kind of habits you develop when you've spent years maintaining order for someone else's chaos. The sound of heels on hardwood broke the quiet. Vanessa stepped into the kitchen, already dressed for the day. Her navy suit was perfectly tailored, her posture flawless. She looked like someone who had stepped into the role she had spent her entire life chasing. She didn't look at him right away. "I'll be late tonight," she said, reaching for her coffee without breaking stride. Grant nodded. "Big week." She gave a faint smile. "Not warm, not cold, just distant." "It's more than a week," she said. "It's everything I've worked for." He studied her for a moment. There was something different in her tone. Not excitement. Finality. He almost asked what she meant, but she was already walking away. The conversation ended the same way most of them had lately, without closure. An hour later, Grant sat in his home office. The sunlight cut across the desk he had built himself years ago. His laptop was open, but his attention wasn't on the screen. He heard her footsteps again. Slower this time, more deliberate. When he looked up, Vanessa was standing in the doorway, exactly by the hallway light, framed like someone entering a boardroom, not a home. She walked in without hesitation. No small talk, no build-up. Just a manila envelope placed neatly on his desk. "I had these drawn up last month," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, like she was presenting a proposal. "I think we both know this hasn't been working." Grant didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at the envelope. Vanessa waited half a second, maybe expecting a reaction. When none came, she turned and walked out. The sound of the front door closing echoed faintly through the house. Then there was silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels like something just shifted permanently. Grant sat there for a long moment, staring at the envelope. He didn't rush to open it. He didn't need to. He understood structure, pressure points, collapse. You didn't start moving until you understood exactly what had been built and how it had been taken apart. Finally, he reached forward, opened it cleanly. The papers inside were precise, detailed, thought through: asset division, property allocation, spousal support calculated off a version of his life that no longer existed, or at least the version Vanessa believed existed: his name, her name. Years reduced to numbers and clauses. He read everything carefully, twice. Then he set the papers down and turned to his laptop. The screen lit up instantly. His banking dashboard opened with a familiar interface. Grant navigated without hesitation. Joint accounts first, then investment history. The numbers on the screen didn't match what he expected. Not even close. He leaned in slightly, his expression unchanged, clicked into the transaction log, scrolled, paused, scrolled again. The pattern was subtle, clean, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But he was. Every few months, small amounts had disappeared. Not enough to trigger alerts, not enough to raise suspicion, but consistent, deliberate. Grant's hand rested lightly on the desk as he traced the sequence. The withdrawals stretched back nearly 2 years. His eyes didn't narrow, his breathing didn't change. But something inside him locked into place. This wasn't just divorce, this was planning. He clicked deeper, followed the trail. The receiving account loaded onto the screen, 2 names attached to it: Vanessa Mercer and Logan Pierce. Grant stared at the screen for a long second, then leaned back slowly in his chair, still calm, still quiet, but no longer passive, because in that moment, he understood something Vanessa never expected him to see. And without saying a word, he reached for his phone, not to call her, but to call someone who knew exactly how to read what he had just found. Grant didn't dial immediately. He sat there for a moment, phone in his hand, eyes still on the screen. Vanessa's name next to Logan Pierce's. Not hidden, not even disguised, just sitting there like something that had stopped pretending to be careful. That told him more than the numbers ever could. This hadn't been panic, it hadn't been a mistake. It had been confidence. He finally scrolled down and tapped a contact he hadn't needed in a long time: Ethan Brooks. The call rang twice before it picked up. "Grant?" Ethan's voice carried a mix of surprise and recognition. "It's been a while, it has," Grant said, his tone even. "I need you to come by tonight. Bring your laptop." There was a pause. Not hesitation, assessment. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "No," Grant replied simply. "But I will be." Another pause. "Shorter this time. I'll be there after 6." The line went quiet. Grant set his phone down and leaned back slightly in his chair. The house felt different now. Not empty, just rearranged. Like he was seeing the structure for what it really was. He stood and walked slowly through the rooms, not searching for anything, just observing. The living room, the kitchen, the details he had built, adjusted, maintained. Everything still in place, everything carrying a different weight. On the kitchen counter, Vanessa had left her empty coffee mug. Lipstick on the rim, clean, precise, like everything else she did. Grant rinsed it out without thinking. Her old habits didn't disappear overnight, but something in him had already shifted. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. By the time Ethan arrived, the sun had already dropped below the skyline. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that made every small sound stand out. Ethan stepped inside, dressed casually but sharp in the way people who worked with numbers often were. His eyes moved quickly, taking in the space, then settling on Grant. "You didn't sound like yourself," he said. "I'm exactly myself," Grant replied. "That's the problem." He led Ethan into the kitchen, where his laptop was already open. Printed statements sat neatly stacked beside it. Grant didn't waste time. He walked Ethan through everything. The divorce filing first. Clean, calculated, timed. Then the account activity. Ethan leaned forward, his expression tightening as he followed the pattern. His fingers moved across his keyboard, pulling up additional data, cross-referencing. The room stayed quiet except for the soft clicking of keys. Grant didn't interrupt. He let the evidence... "Okay," Ethan said finally, exhaling slowly. "This isn't random. I know, these withdrawals, every 3 months, sometimes shorter gaps. 12 to 18,000 each time. That's intentional structuring." Grant nodded. "They're spaced around your review cycles," Ethan continued. "Just enough to avoid triggering attention. Whoever did this understood how you manage accounts." Grant didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. Ethan already knew. He clicked into the receiving account details. His eyes narrowed slightly as the names loaded. "Well," he said under his breath, "that answers a few questions." Grant watched him. "Vanessa Mercer," Ethan read, "and Logan Pierce." Ethan looked up. "CFO, right?" "Sterling Meridian." Yes. And this account was opened about 2 years ago. Grant nodded again. Ethan leaned back slightly, processing. So the timeline lines up. He joins the company, this account opens, and then the transfers start. Almost immediately, Grant said. Ethan gave a low whistle. That's not just an affair. No, that's coordinated. Grant's gaze dropped briefly to the table. Not out of weakness. Just calculation, dinner charges, Ethan continued, hotels, travel expenses labeled as business trips. It's all here if you know where to look. He paused, then looked at Grant again. You've been funding their relationship. The words landed flat. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just factual. Grant didn't flinch. I wasn't funding it, he said quietly. I was maintaining the system they used. Ethan studied him for a moment. You're taking this better than most people would. Grant's expression didn't change. Most people don't get 2 years of data before reacting. That earned the smallest hint of a smile from Ethan. Fair point. He turned back to the screen, fingers moving again. Legally, this matters a lot. These are marital funds, undisclosed transfers. That's financial misconduct at minimum. Grant nodded once. I'm not ready to move on it yet. Ethan glanced at him. Why not? Because she thinks I don't see it, Grant said. And right now, that's more valuable than anything we could file. Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering that. You want her comfortable, I want her predictable. Silence settled again. Not tense, focused. Ethan closed his laptop halfway, then looked at Grant more directly. There's something else, he said. Grant didn't ask. Ethan tapped the screen lightly. This account where the money's going, it's active. Not just receiving, they're moving funds out again. Smaller amounts, different channels. Grant's eyes sharpened slightly. Layering, he asked. Possibly, Ethan said. Or preparing for something bigger. Either way, this isn't ending with a divorce settlement. Grant absorbed that, slowly, carefully. That's what I thought, he said. Ethan studied him for another second. So what's the plan? Grant stood walking to the counter and pouring 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Ethan without a word, then leaned lightly against the edge. The plan, he said, is to let her believe she already won. Ethan raised an eyebrow and then. Grant took a slow sip. And then we see how much she's willing to lose to keep believing that. Ethan nodded slowly. All right, then we do this properly. He opened his laptop again. I'll build a full timeline, every transfer, every connection. If there's more, we'll find it. Grant set his cup down. There is more, he said quietly. Grant didn't elaborate. Not yet. Because for the first time since he opened that envelope, the situation had stopped being about what Vanessa had taken, and started becoming about what she had never understood. Ethan's screen reflected faintly in the darkened window behind him as he pulled deeper into the account structure. Then he stopped. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Grant, he said slowly, you might want to see this. Grant stepped closer, his gaze shifting to the screen. A new set of transactions had just loaded, different pattern, different scale, and tied to an entity neither of them had expected to appear that early. Ethan didn't speak for a few seconds. He leaned closer to the screen, zooming in, scrolling slowly, then stopping again. The shift in his posture was subtle, but Grant noticed it immediately. Ethan wasn't just analyzing anymore. He was recalculating. This shouldn't be here, Ethan said quietly. Grant stayed still beside him. What is it? Ethan clicked into the transaction detail, pulling up metadata most people never thought to check. Routing layers, entity tags, linked accounts. The name that surfaced wasn't personal. It was corporate, Northbridge Infrastructure Partners. Grant's eyes didn't widen. He didn't react at all on the surface. But internally, something aligned. That's not random, Ethan continued. This isn't just personal money moving around. Some of these transfers, they're brushing against corporate channels. Brushing, Grant asked. Not directly tied, Ethan clarified. More like adjacent. Think of it like someone skimming water too close to a current they don't understand. Grant folded his arms loosely, thinking. Vanessa didn't know what Northbridge really was. To her, it was just another large infrastructure firm, one of many competitors or potential partners in the market. She had never asked him about it, never cared to. And Logan? Logan definitely didn't know. Ethan clicked again, pulling up a broader network map. Lines connected accounts, vendors, payment processors. A quiet web most people would never see. This account they're using, Ethan said, pointing. It's touched a vendor chain that's also connected to a Northbridge subcontractor. Grant didn't respond right away. That means one of two things, Ethan went on. Either they're incredibly unlucky, or they're moving money through systems they don't fully understand. Grant exhaled slowly. They think it's invisible, he said. Ethan nodded. Yeah, and to most people it would be. The room fell quiet again. Grant reached forward and closed the laptop halfway, not shutting it, just pausing the flow of information. Keep digging, he said, but don't flag anything. I don't want this triggering alerts. Ethan raised an eyebrow. If this connects the wrong way, it could get messy fast. I know, you're sure you want to sit on it? Grant met his gaze. Calm? Certain? Yes. Ethan studied him for a moment, then nodded once. All right, I'll map everything out clean. No noise. Grant picked up the printed statements and aligned them neatly, tapping them against the table until the edges were perfect. Order mattered, even now, especially now. Ethan packed up slowly, his movements more deliberate than when he arrived. At the door, he paused. Grant, he said, this isn't just divorce anymore. I know, you're dealing with personal betrayal and potential financial exposure. Those don't stay separate for long. Grant nodded once. That's why I'm not reacting yet. Ethan gave a short, approving look. Call me if anything changes. After he left, the house returned to silence. Grant stood in the entryway for a moment, then turned back toward his office. He didn't rush. There was no urgency in his movements, but there was direction. He sat down at his desk and opened a different laptop. Not the one connected to their household accounts. This one booted into a separate system entirely. Clean interface, no shared access. He logged in quickly. A series of secure dashboards loaded in sequence, investment portfolios, active contracts, equity positions, structured funds, numbers far beyond what Vanessa had ever imagined. Grant scanned them briefly, then opened his email. There it was. A message marked high priority. From Adrian Foster. Grant read it once. Then again. The final approval required. The body outlined a deal already in motion. Municipal infrastructure expansion. Multi-year commitment. High-value contract. Northbridge was leading it. And Grant's authorization sat at the center of it. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back, thinking through timing, through exposure, through consequences. If he signed now, the deal would move forward publicly within days. Vanessa would see it. Logan might recognize the connection too late. If he waited, the window would tighten. He glanced at the clock. Then at the divorce papers, still sitting on the edge of his desk. Vanessa thought she had already defined his future. Smaller apartment, reduced income, limited options. She had built her entire exit strategy on that assumption. Grant reached forward and closed the email without replying. Not yet. His phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. We should talk about next steps. I've started looking at rental options for you. There's a place near Brookhaven that might fit your budget. Grant stared at the message for a second. No anger, just clarity. He typed a short reply. Sure, we can talk. He set the phone down gently, then opened a secure folder on his system. Inside were documents Vanessa had never seen, ownership structures, equity stakes layered through holding companies, approval rights buried deep enough that only a handful of people even knew they existed. Grant clicked into one file, scrolled, paused. There it was, his name, not Mublik, not obvious, but definitive. He closed the file and leaned back again, eyes moving slowly across the room. For years he had built quietly, not for recognition, or not for leverage, just because that was how he worked. Now for the first time, that quiet work had a different purpose, not revenge, not even exposure, control. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message. It was a call. Unknown number. Grant let it ring once, twice, then answered. Grant Mercer, he said. The voice on the other end was professional, controlled, Mr. Mercer. This is Daniel Crawford, representing Vanessa Mercer. Grant didn't move. I'd like to schedule a formal discussion regarding the divorce, filing, and asset disclosures, the lawyer continued. Given the circumstances, we believe it would be efficient to move quickly. Grant's gaze shifted slightly toward the closed laptop on his desk, toward the deal waiting for his signature, toward the information Vanessa didn't even know existed. Of course, he said calmly, I'm available. There was a brief pause on the other end, as if the attorney had expected a hesitation. Good, Daniel Crawford said. We'll coordinate details shortly. The call ended. Grant lowered the phone slowly. Then, without a word, he turned back to his laptop and opened the email from Adrian Foster again. Grant didn't answer the email right away. He read Adrian Foster's message again, slower this time, letting each line settle. The contract wasn't just large, it was strategic, a multi-year infrastructure expansion tied to municipal funding and private capital. The kind of deal that didn't just generate revenue, it shaped markets. And his approval sat at the center of it. He closed the screen halfway and leaned back. Timing mattered more than anything now. If he moved too early, Vanessa might start asking questions. If he waited too long, he risked losing control of the narrative she was already building. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Vanessa, tomorrow morning. Coffee near my office. We should finalize how we're handling the house. Grant stared at the message for a second. Handling the house. Not their house. The house. He typed a short reply. Morning works. Then he set the phone aside and reopened the email. His cursor hovered over the reply button. Not hesitation, calculation. Adrian had written with the tone of someone expecting confirmation, not negotiation. That alone said enough. People didn't push for decisions like this unless they already knew who they were dealing with. Grant typed a single sentence. Hold for 2 weeks. Personal matter to resolve. He hit send, then closed the laptop. The decision was simple. Vanessa needed to keep believing he had no leverage. The next morning, Grant arrived early. The coffee shop sat across from Sterling Meridian Group's headquarters, floor-to-ceiling glass. Clean lines, the kind of place where deals were discussed casually over expensive coffee. He ordered her drink without asking. Almond milk, light vanilla. Some habits didn't need confirmation. When Vanessa walked in, she spotted him immediately. Her expression shifted just enough to register approval, not affection. Approval. You got here early, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. I had time, Grant replied. He pushed the coffee toward her. She took it with a small smile. Thank you, I appreciate you being reasonable about everything. Reasonable. Grant nodded, as if the word fit. I've had time to think, he said. Vanessa relaxed slightly, her posture softening. That was what she wanted to hear. Processing. Acceptance. Good. That's exactly what we need, she said, clarity. She pulled out her phone, already opening notes. So, the house. It makes the most sense for me to keep it. My schedule, proximity to the office, it's just more practical. Grant didn't interrupt. You'd be better off somewhere smaller, she continued. There's a place in Brookhaven I looked at. It's not far, and it fits what you'd need. What you'd need, not what you want. Grant took a slow sip of his coffee. That could work, he said. Vanessa nodded, satisfied. Good, I'm glad you see that. She tapped something into her phone, efficient, organized, like she was closing a business deal. Also, she added, glancing up, we should keep things clean, no unnecessary complications. The sooner we finalize everything, the better. Grant watched her for a moment, simple, controlled. She believed this was already finished. I agree, he said. Vanessa smiled again, more openly this time. Relief. I knew you would, she said. You've always been steady. The word lingered. Not strong, not capable, steady. Grant nodded once. They spent the next 20 minutes going over details that wouldn't matter in a week. Lease timelines, utility transfers. Small logistics that made her feel like she was managing the outcome. Grant asked the right questions, nodded at the right moments, let her lead. Across the street, the glass exterior of Sterling Meridian reflected the morning light. Vanessa's building. Her world. She followed his gaze briefly. It's a lot, she said, almost to herself. But it's worth it. Grant didn't respond, because for her it was power, recognition, control, everything she had chosen over him. When they stood to leave, Vanessa reached out and touched his arm lightly. A gesture that might have meant something once. This is the right thing, she said. For both of us. Grant met her eyes, of course. She walked away first. He watched her cross the street toward the building. Confident, certain, already thinking about the next meeting, the next decision, the next step in a life she believed she had secured. As soon as she disappeared through the doors, Grant sat back down. He didn't rush. He didn't check his phone. He just sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle again. Then his phone buzzed. Ethan. Grant answered immediately. I've got more, Ethan said without preamble. Grant's expression didn't change. Go ahead. That account we looked at? It's connected to something bigger. I pulled vendor records tied to Sterling Meridian. Grant leaned forward slightly. And Logan's department has been routing payments through a shell vendor, Ethan said. Looks clean on the surface. But when you trace it, some of that money loops back into personal accounts. Grant's jaw tightened just a fraction. How much? Hard to say yet, Ethan replied. But it's not small. And here's the problem. Vanessa's approvals are tied to some of those transactions. Grant didn't speak. Which means, Ethan continued, whether she knew or not, her name is on it. Grant exhaled slowly. Corporate exposure. Not just personal betrayal anymore. What's the timeline, he asked. Recent, Ethan said, ongoing, and if they're prepping for anything public, IPO, restructuring, whatever, it's a risk. Grant's eyes shifted toward the building across the street. Vanessa was inside that structure right now, running it, believing she controlled everything. Keep digging, Grant said. I will, Ethan replied. But Grant, if this surfaces the wrong way, it won't just be messy, it'll be public. Grant nodded once, even though Ethan couldn't see it. I understand. The call ended. Grant sat there for a moment longer, then reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone again. He opened his email. Adrian Foster had already replied. 2 weeks is tight. Board review scheduled sooner. We may need your confirmation earlier. Grant read the message twice. Board review. So the timeline was moving faster than expected. He tapped the screen thinking. Then his phone buzzed again. A new notification. Calendar invite. From Northbridge Infrastructure Partners. Subject line. Preliminary board session. Attendance requested. Grant stared at it for a long second. Because this wasn't just a meeting, it was a point of visibility, and if Vanessa saw his name attached to that room, everything would change. He didn't decline. He didn't accept. He just looked at the screen, then quietly added it to his calendar. Grant didn't accept the board invite that night. He didn't decline it either. He left it sitting in his calendar like a loaded decision, something that would change shape depending on when he touched it. Instead, he drove downtown the next morning to a building Vanessa had never once asked about. Victoria Lawson's office didn't try to impress. No glass walls, no skyline dominance, just quiet, controlled space. The kind of place where outcomes were built carefully, not announced. Grant stepped inside without hesitation. The receptionist looked up, already expecting him. Ms. Lawson is ready for you. Of course she was. Victoria stood when he entered, extending a hand with calm precision. Mr. Mercer, Victoria. They didn't waste time. The conference table between them was already set with files, legal pads, a laptop open and waiting. She had done her homework. Grant placed his own folder down and sat across from her. Walk me through what you know, she said. Grant didn't start with the affair. He started with the numbers. He opened his laptop, pulled up the joint account, and turned the screen toward her. These are the transfers. Victoria leaned in, scanning quickly. Patterned, she said. How long? 22 months. She nodded once, and the receiving account? Grant tapped again. The name appeared, Vanessa Mercer. Logan Pierce. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind her eyes. CFO, she said. Yes. She sat back, folding her hands. So this isn't emotional, it's structural. Grant held her gaze. That's what I believe. Victoria nodded slowly. Good. That means it's easier to dismantle. She reached for a pen and started writing. First, the divorce filing, she said. I reviewed what you sent. She's made assumptions. Grant didn't respond. She's calculated spousal support based on your current consulting income, Victoria continued. That only works if you don't push back on earning capacity. I won't let that stand. I didn't think you would. She flipped to another page. Second, she's presented the marital assets as if they're complete. Grant leaned forward slightly. They're not. Victoria's eyes lifted. Show me. Grant opened the second folder. Paper slid across the table. Deeds, appraisals, rental agreements. Victoria's pen paused. This was acquired before the marriage, she said, scanning the first document. Yes. Cash purchase. No financing. Yes. She turned to the next page, and the income, self-sustaining, separate account. Victoria looked up fully now, and she doesn't know. Grant shook his head once. She never asked. Silence settled for a second, not surprise, assessment. Victoria closed the file carefully. That changes everything, she said. Grant didn't smile. This is only one piece. Victoria's expression sharpened further. How many pieces are there? Grant didn't answer directly. Enough. That was all she needed. She leaned back in her chair, thinking. Third, she said finally, tapping the legal pad, the transfers. Her tone shifted, more deliberate now. This isn't just marital misconduct. This is financial fraud. Grant didn't move. She moved joint funds without disclosure, Victoria continued. Structured to avoid detection, that's intent, and Logan? Complicit, Victoria said without hesitation. At minimum, she paused. Possibly more. Grant's eyes didn't leave her. There is more, he said. Victoria held his gaze. Then you need to decide something now, she said. What? Do you want to win the divorce, she said calmly. Or do you want to control everything that comes after it? The question sat between them. Grant didn't rush it, because he understood exactly what she meant. Divorce was one battlefield. Reputation, career, corporate exposure, that was another. I want control, he said. Victoria nodded once. Then we don't move yet. Grant's jaw tightened slightly. Explain. We let her believe exactly what she believes right now, Victoria said. That you're overwhelmed, that you'll sign, that this is simple. Grant leaned back, considering. And while she's building that narrative, Victoria continued, we build ours. She turned the legal pad toward him. A timeline had already begun to form. Transfers, filing date, promotion, connections, everything lines up, she said. Her rise, the money movement, the relationship with Logan. Grant looked at the pattern. It wasn't random, it was aligned. She planned this, he said quietly. Yes, Victoria replied, which means she thinks she understands the risk. Grant's voice stayed even. She doesn't. Victoria allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. No, she agreed. She doesn't. She reached for another document. Now, one more thing, she said. Grant waited. If we move forward with the fraud angle, Victoria continued, we can recover the funds, possibly damages. But more importantly, she tapped the paper. Leverage. Grant nodded. He understood leverage, but his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. Ethan. Grant held up a hand to Victoria. 1 second, he answered. Ethan didn't ease into it this time. I confirmed it, he said. Grant's eyes narrowed slightly. Confirmed what? The vendor accounts, Ethan replied. They're not just personal bleed. They're tied to Sterling Meridian's internal reporting. Grant didn't speak. And here's where it gets worse, Ethan added. Those transactions? They're sitting inside pre-IPO prep documents. Victoria's head tilted slightly, watching Grant's reaction. Which means? Grant asked. It's not just internal fraud, Ethan said. It's exposure. Regulatory exposure. Grant's grip on the phone tightened just enough. Is Vanessa tied directly? Her approvals are on record, Ethan said. Not all of them, but enough. Grant closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. How long before someone else sees this, he asked. Hard to say, Ethan replied, but if the board reviews it closely, or if anything triggers an audit, it won't stay buried. Grant looked across the table at Victoria. She was already watching him differently now, not as a client, as a man holding something much larger than a divorce. Keep everything contained, Grant said into the phone. For now, Ethan replied. The call ended. Silence returned. Victoria spoke first. That changes the scope. Grant nodded slowly. Yes, she leaned forward. Does she know? No. Victoria exhaled once. Then you have something she doesn't even realize she's risking. Grant's voice was calm. She thinks she's walking away clean. Victoria's response was immediate. She's not walking away from anything, she said. She's walking into it. Grant stood, not abruptly, decisively. Victoria didn't try to stop him. What's your next move, she asked. Grant picked up his folder. He thought about the board meeting invite, the contract waiting for his approval. The company Vanessa believed she controlled. I'm going to let her keep talking, he said. Victoria watched him closely. And when she's done, Grant looked at her, then said it simply. I'll decide what she loses. He walked out of the office without another word. Back in his car, he finally opened the calendar invite again. Preliminary board session. Attendance requested. This time, he didn't hesitate. He tapped accept, and within seconds, a confirmation email came through. But it wasn't just a confirmation. It included the full attendee list. Grant's eyes scanned it once, then stopped, because near the top, Vanessa Mercer's name was there, and right below it, Logan Pierce. The coffee shop Vanessa chose sat 2 blocks from Sterling Meridian's headquarters, all glass and polished steel, the kind of place that made simplicity feel expensive. Grant arrived early. He ordered her usual without asking. Almond milk, light foam, just enough vanilla to soften the bitterness. He placed it across from his seat before she even walked in. When Vanessa stepped inside, she didn't look surprised to see him there. She looked relieved, not the relief of reconciliation, or the relief of confirmation. She crossed the room in a fitted navy coat, her posture exact, her movements controlled. Everything about her said she was already ahead. You got here early, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Grant nodded once. Traffic was light. She reached for the coffee, took a small sip, and gave a brief approving nod. Still I remember what matters. She didn't react to that, or maybe she chose not to. Vanessa set the cup down and leaned back slightly, studying him. I appreciate how you've been handling this. Grant waited. No drama, she continued. No surprises. It makes things easier. For who? He asked quietly. She smiled faintly, as if the question didn't deserve a full answer. For everyone. There it was again. Everyone. Not them. Grant let the silence stretch just long enough to make the word feel hollow. Vanessa leaned forward, shifting into a more practical tone. I've been looking at some rental options for you. Grant didn't interrupt. There's a complex near Brookhaven, she continued, pulling out her phone. 2-bedroom units, covered parking. It would make the transition smoother. Smoother. Like she was discussing a furniture delivery. Grant glanced at the screen she turned toward him. Clean, neutral interiors, temporary spaces. Looks efficient, he said. Vanessa nodded, satisfied. It is, and it's within your budget. Grant's eyes lifted to meet hers. My budget. She didn't hesitate. Based on your current consulting income, yes. He held her gaze a second longer than comfortable, then nodded once. I'll consider it. Relief flickered across her face again. She mistook agreement for compliance. Good, she said, tapping her phone. I'll send you the details. It's important we keep things practical. Grant leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, almost casual. What about the house? He asked. Vanessa's tone stayed smooth. It makes more sense for me to keep it. My schedule, proximity to the office, it's just logical. Grant looked at her. At the woman who had built a career on precision and strategy, and had somehow applied none of that to understanding him. You've thought this through, he said. I have, she replied without hesitation. Grant nodded again. Of course you have. For a moment something shifted between them, a small crack in the rhythm. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she sensed something just out of reach, but then it passed. She checked her watch, already moving on. I have a meeting in 20 minutes, she said. So let's finalize a few things. She opened her notes. Timeline, she continued. If we can get the paperwork signed this week, you could be moved out within 10 days. Grant didn't react immediately. He let her finish. Let her build the version of the future she believed was already set. And I'll coordinate with the attorneys to keep it clean, she added. No need to complicate anything. Grant leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. You've planned all of this, he said. Vanessa met his eyes. Yes, down to where I live. It's about making this easier, she said. For you, Grant replied softly. Her expression tightened for a fraction of a second, then smoothed out again. For everyone, she repeated. Grant nodded slowly. Then he did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Not wide, not warm, just enough. You're right, he said. It should be easy. Vanessa relaxed again, because that was the answer she wanted, the one that confirmed everything she believed about him, that he would fold, that he would adjust, that he would stay exactly who she thought he was. They finished the conversation in the same tone, calm, controlled, efficient. Vanessa stood first, gathering her coat. This means a lot, she said, touching his arm briefly. That you're being reasonable. Grant looked down at her hand, then back at her. I always have been. She didn't catch the difference. She left the coffee shop without looking back. Grant remained seated for a moment, still, watching the space she had just occupied. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Grant opened it. A short transcript. Time-stamped. Vanessa's voice. Logan's response. He read it once, then again. She's already lined everything up, Logan said. I told you, Vanessa replied. Grant doesn't fight. He never has. A pause. Then a quiet laugh. He won't even see it coming. Grant locked the screen, set the phone down, and for the first time that morning something shifted inside him. Not anger, not even hurt, clarity. He reached for his coffee, now cold, didn't drink it, or just held it for a second, then set it back down and stood. By the time he stepped outside, his phone was already in his hand again. He opened his email, scrolled to the message he had been ignoring for days. Northbridge Infrastructure Partners. Subject, final confirmation, strategic contract. Grant didn't hesitate this time. He opened it, reviewed the terms once, then again. 3-year infrastructure contract, multi-million-dollar scope. Partnership consideration built into performance milestones, and one line that mattered more than all the others. Final approval pending your signature. Grant tapped the document. His name sat at the bottom, not as a consultant. As the approving party, he signed clean, precise, final. Within seconds, a reply came through. Welcome back. We've been waiting on you. Grant stared at the message for a moment, then closed his phone. Vanessa thought she had just secured control of her future. She thought she had already calculated his limits. Or she thought the version of him sitting across from her at that table was complete. She was wrong. Grant walked to his car without rushing, because for the first time since she had handed him that envelope, he wasn't reacting anymore. He was deciding. And somewhere across the city, in a glass office she believed belonged entirely to her, Vanessa Mercer was about to walk into a week she would never be able to control. Grant's phone buzzed again just as he reached the driver's door. A new email, different sender, Sterling Meridian Group. Subject line, Executive Board Session, updated attendance confirmation. Grant opened it slowly, and this time, there was a new name added beneath his, Adrian Foster. Grant didn't go home right away. He drove instead. Not toward Brookhaven. Not toward anything Vanessa had suggested. He headed toward Midtown Atlanta, where the commercial buildings sat, quiet, renovated, and deliberately invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. He parked across the street and stayed in the car for a moment. The building looked like any other on the block. Clean brick, updated glass, tenants who paid their rent on time and never asked who owned the place. That had always been the point. Grant stepped out and crossed the street, unlocking the front door with a key Vanessa had never seen. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of fresh wood and polished concrete. He had redesigned this space himself years ago. Not for show, for durability. Everything he built lasted. That included the parts of his life Vanessa had ignored. His phone buzzed as he moved toward the staircase. Adrian. Grant answered on the second ring. You finally signed, Adrian Foster said, his voice calm but edged with something like approval. Yes. About time, Adrian replied. They've been holding that contract open longer than they should have. Grant didn't respond. He climbed the stairs slowly, hand brushing the railing he had reinforced himself. You're coming to the board session, Adrian continued. I accepted. A pause. Then good. Grant reached the second floor and stepped into one of the vacant units. Sunlight cutting across the empty space. You know what they're planning, Adrian said. I know enough. That company isn't stable, Adrian added. Not the way they think it is. Grant looked out the window, down at the street. I'm aware. Another pause. Adrian didn't waste words. Then I assume you're not walking into that room unprepared. Grant's voice stayed even. I never do. That's why they don't see you coming, Adrian said. Grant ended the call without another word. He stood in the empty unit for a while, quiet, thinking. Vanessa had spent the last 2 years building her exit, structuring it, timing it, aligning it with her promotion, her relationship with Logan, her version of control. She had treated the marriage like an asset to be liquidated, and she had assumed the other party didn't understand the numbers. Grant moved through the space slowly, checking details out of habit. A hinge that needed tightening, a corner that needed repainting, small things, fixable things. Unlike phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Victoria. They've accelerated. Grant's attention sharpened. How? He replied. Vanessa's attorney reached out, Victoria responded. They want to finalize disclosures before the board session. Grant's jaw tightened slightly. Of course they did. Vanessa wasn't just planning the divorce. She was controlling the timing, trying to close everything before anything could interfere, before anything could surface. Do we respond? Victoria asked. Grant didn't answer immediately. He walked to the far end of the unit and looked back across the space. Years ago, he had stood in this same spot, seeing potential no one else had bothered to notice. Now he saw something else. Pattern, pressure, movement. They think I'm rushing, he said finally. Yes, they think. I want this over. Yes. Grant's voice dropped slightly. Then we slow it down, a pause on the other end, then understood. Victoria didn't need more explanation. She knew what delay meant in this context. Time to document, time to position, time to let the other side make more mistakes. Grant ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He stayed in the building another 20 minutes. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to, because it reminded him of something simple. He wasn't starting from nothing, he never had been. When he finally left, the sun was lower, the street busier. Life moving around him like it always did. Unaware, just like Vanessa. By the time he reached his car, another message had come through. Ethan again. Grant opened it immediately. New development, the message read. You need to see this. Attached was a document. Grant opened it. A preliminary internal report. Sterling Meridian Group. Then slowed down, vendor locations, expense categorization, approval chains. And there, Logan Pierce's department. Grant's eyes moved lower. Signature blocks, dates, authorization records. Vanessa's name appeared, not once, multiple times. Not direct transfers, but approvals. Clear enough to raise questions, not clear enough to deny involvement. Grant closed the document halfway, then opened it again. He read it carefully this time. Every line, every number, every connection. This wasn't just something she could explain away. This was exposure, structured, documented waiting. His phone rang. Ethan, Grant answered. You saw it, Ethan. Yes, it's worse than we thought, Ethan continued. This isn't sloppy. It's layered. They built this to look legitimate. Grant didn't interrupt. But here's the problem, Ethan added. Once someone looks closely, it falls apart fast. How fast? Grant asked. Fast enough that if the board gets nervous, they'll act before anyone can control the narrative. Grant looked back at the document on his screen. Vanessa thought she was in control of the divorce, of the company, of him. She doesn't know, Grant quietly. No, Ethan replied, she doesn't. Grant's voice stayed calm, she will. There was a pause. Then Ethan asked the question that mattered. When? Grant ended the call without answering. He leaned back in his seat, the document still open in his hand, the board session, the divorce timeline, the internal report. Everything was moving now, faster than Vanessa expected, faster than she could adjust. Grant closed the file and locked his phone. He started the engine, but he didn't drive yet, because for the first time since this began, he could see the exact moment it would break, and he wasn't going to rush it. He was going to choose it. His phone buzzed one last time, a calendar update. Sterling Meridian Group. Subject. Board session, agenda revised. Grant opened it slowly. This time, there was an attachment. He downloaded it, opened it, and his eyes stopped on a single line added near the bottom. Special review, vendor allocation oversight. Grant didn't move, because that wasn't routine. That was the beginning of an audit. And Vanessa Mercer had no idea she was about to walk into a room where her own signature was already waiting for her. Vanessa didn't notice the change right away, not that morning. She walked into Sterling Meridian's headquarters with the same measured confidence she had worn since the board named her CEO. The glass doors opened before she reached them. Assistants nodded. Conversations softened as she passed. Everything looked exactly the way she believed it should. Controlled, predictable, earned. Logan was already waiting in her office when she stepped inside. He didn't knock anymore. He leaned against her desks, sleeves rolled, tie loosened just enough to look deliberate. You're early, Vanessa said, setting her bag down. So are you, he replied. She moved past him without slowing, placing her phone on the desk and pulling up her calendar. Board session's been updated, he said. I saw. Vanessa's voice stayed calm, but her eyes paused on the screen a fraction longer than usual. Vendor oversight, Logan added. That wasn't on the original agenda. Vanessa turned slightly. It's routine, she said. Logan didn't answer right away. He studied her. It doesn't feel routine. Vanessa met his gaze, the narrative. That was how she had gotten here, not by reacting, by staying ahead. Logan exhaled slowly, then nodded. Fine, then we stay ahead. Vanessa returned to her screen. Exactly. But something in the room had shifted. Not enough to name, just enough to register. A small fracture beneath the surface. She pushed it aside. There were more immediate things to finalize. Did you hear back from the attorney? Logan asked. Yes, Vanessa replied. We're pushing disclosures forward. I want everything signed before the end of the week. Logan's expression sharpened. Before the board session. Vanessa didn't look up. Yes. He smiled faintly. Still think he'll just sign? Vanessa's fingers moved across the screen, precise. I know he will. Logan didn't question it because everything they had seen from Grant supported that belief. Quiet, measured, accommodating, the kind of man who adjusted instead of resisted, the kind of man who didn't create problems. He didn't even push back at coffee, Logan said. You told him where to live and he just accepted it. Vanessa finally looked up. That's who he is. Her tone carried certainty. Not cruelty, something colder, final. Logan nodded slowly. Vanessa returned to her work. Yes, but across the city, Grant wasn't thinking about clarity. He was thinking about timing. He sat in his home's office, the same place Vanessa had stood when she handed him the envelope, and reviewed the board session materials again. Not just the agenda, the structure. Who spoke first? Who controlled the flow? Who had the authority to redirect? Or he wasn't guessing. He knew how rooms like that worked, because he had built them, not physically, strategically. His phone buzzed. Victoria, they're pushing disclosures, she said without greeting. I expected that. They want you to move fast. Grant leaned back slightly. Or they want me to move blind. A pause, Victoria said, which means we don't. Grant glanced at the clock. We respond tomorrow. Request additional documentation. Extend the timeline. That will frustrate them. That's the point. Victoria didn't argue. She understood pressure. And the board session, she asked. Grant's voice stayed even. I'll be there. Another pause. Do they know? No, Victoria exhaled slowly. Then we're still in control. Grant ended the call and turned back to his screen. The intel report Ethan had sent sat open beside the agenda. 2 separate tracks, personal, corporate, but they were no longer separate, they were converging. He reached for a pen and began marking connections. Approval chains, dates, cross-references. Vanessa's signature appeared again, and again, not enough to accuse, but enough to question. And in a room like that, questions were leverage. His phone buzzed again. Adrian this time, Grant answered. You saw the agenda, Adrian said. Yes. They're nervous. Grant didn't respond. Which means someone's already flagged something, Adrian continued. That review line? That's not casual. Grant's eyes stayed on the document. I know. So what's your move? Adrian asked. Grant's voice didn't change. I let them start. A short silence. Then Adrian let out a quiet breath. You're going to let her walk into it. Grant didn't correct him, because that was exactly what was happening. She believes she's in control, Grant said. And she's not, Adrian replied. No. Grant ended the call and closed the file. For a moment the room went still, then he stood, walked to the cabinet at the bottom of his desk, opened it. Inside, everything was already there. Documents, contracts, ownership structures. Agreements that extended far beyond what Vanessa had ever imagined. He didn't take them out, not yet. He closed the cabinet again. Because timing mattered more than proof. Across the city, Vanessa stood in a conference room reviewing projections with her executive team. Numbers lined the screen, growth curves, expansion models. Everything pointed upward. Everything reinforced what she believed, that she had built something real, that she had earned this position, that nothing behind her could reach forward and touch it. Logan sat beside her, flipping through reports, confilaxed, untouched by doubt, until the assistant stepped in quietly. Ms. Mercer, she said, holding a tablet, there's been a minor update to the board attendance. Vanessa didn't look up immediately. Send it to me. The assistant hesitated. It's already been sent, but you might want to see this now. That was enough to pull Vanessa's attention. She took the tablet, glanced at the screen, then looked again. Her expression didn't break, but something inside it shifted. Just slightly, Logan noticed. What is it? Vanessa handed him the tablet without a word. He scanned the list, names, positions, nothing unusual, until his eyes reached the bottom and stopped. Since when is he attending this? Logan asked. Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Because she didn't have one. Her mind moved quickly, searching for context, authority, permission, justification, but none of it aligned cleanly. He's not part of the executive structure, Logan said. No, Vanessa replied, but her voice lacked the certainty it had carried all morning. Because for the first time, something had entered the room she hadn't planned for, something she didn't control. Logan looked back at her. Do you want me to look into it? Vanessa shook her head slowly. No. She took the tablet back. Stared at the name again. Grant Mercer, listed under confirmed attendees. No title, no explanation, just present, and that, more than anything, was what unsettled her, because it didn't fit, and things that didn't fit had a way of becoming problems. Vanessa set the tablet down carefully. Leave it, she said. Logan frowned slightly. You're sure? Vanessa nodded. Yes, but her eyes lingered on the screen a second too long. Because somewhere beneath all the certainty she had built, a question had started to form, and she didn't have an answer for it yet. The room was colder than Vanessa expected. Not physically. Controlled, structured, neutral, but colder in the way people held themselves when they were waiting for something to unfold. Vanessa took her seat at the head of the long conference table. The board members were already in place, each one with a tablet or printed packet in front of them. Logan sat slightly behind her to the right, close enough to speak if needed, far enough to maintain the illusion of hierarchy. She placed her hands lightly on the table. Steady, prepared. Let's begin, she said. The opening moved exactly as planned. Financial updates, market positioning, expansion projections. Vanessa spoke clearly, confidently. Every number aligned with what she had built. Every slide reinforced the narrative she had spent months shaping. Control, authority, momentum. For a while, nothing disrupted it. Then the agenda shifted. Next item, one of the board members said, glancing down at his notes. Vendor oversight review. Vanessa nodded. Routine, that's what she had told herself. That's what she had told Logan. But as the first report appeared on the screen, she felt it again. That slight misalignment. Numbers that didn't sit quite right. Nothing actionable, but enough to slow her breathing by half a beat. Logan leaned forward slightly. Is that updated data? He asked. It's from the latest internal review, the board member replied. Vanessa watched the screen, watched the columns, watched the approval lines, and then she saw her own name, not unusual, but the pattern around it was. Repeated approvals tied to vendor payments that had been structured, layered, distributed over time. Her voice remained steady. Can you clarify the scope of this review? She asked. Another board member answered. We're just looking at consistency across approvals. Standard audit process. Vanessa nodded slowly, but she didn't miss the way two of them avoided eye contact. Logan's hand tightened slightly on his pen. Those approvals were operational, he said, nothing outside standard thresholds. The board member didn't argue, of course, but the screen didn't change, and the data stayed there, uncomfortable, unresolved. Vanessa leaned back slightly. This can be addressed after the session, she said. Let's move forward. No one objected, but no one moved immediately either. A pause, small, noticeable. Then the next slide appeared. The meeting continued, but something had shifted. Vanessa felt it now. Not as a thought, as pressure. Like the room was no longer entirely hers. Halfway through the session, the door opened quietly. No one announced it, no one needed to, because several heads turned at once. Vanessa didn't, not immediately. She kept her gaze forward, until the silence behind her stretched just long enough to demand attention. Then she turned. Grant Mercer stepped into the room like he belonged there, no hesitation, no apology, just calm, measured presence. Vanessa's chest tightened before she could stop it, not because he was there, but because of how no one stopped him, no one questioned him. One of the senior board members stood slightly. Mr. Mercer, he said, with a level of respect Vanessa hadn't heard directed at Grant before. We're just moving into the next section. Grant gave a small nod. Go ahead, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Vanessa's fingers pressed lightly into the table. This didn't make sense, not the acknowledgement, not the tone, not the way the room adjusted around him without explanation. Logan leaned toward her, voice low. What is this? Vanessa didn't answer, because she didn't know, and that was new. Grant didn't take a seat at the far end. He moved to an empty chair along the side of the table, not central, not peripheral, positioned, like someone who understood exactly where to sit to see everything. The meeting resumed, but Vanessa couldn't ignore it now. Every number on the screen felt heavier, every approval line sharper, every decision more exposed. She forced herself to stay focused, to speak when needed, to maintain the structure. But her attention kept pulling back to him. Grant wasn't watching her. He was watching the data, reviewing, connecting, like he had seen it before, like he understood it in a way that didn't match the man she had dismissed. One of the board members cleared his throat. We should address the vendor distribution anomalies before we move on. Vanessa's head snapped slightly toward him. That's not necessary in this session, she said. Her voice was still controlled, but tighter now. The board member hesitated, then glanced briefly at Grant. That was the moment everything shifted. Because Grant didn't speak immediately, he simply looked up, met the board member's eyes, then gave the smallest nod. That was enough. We should address it, the board member said. More firmly this time. Vanessa felt something cold settle in her chest. Not panic, recognition. She turned slowly, looked directly at Grant for the first time since he entered. What exactly are you doing here? She asked. The room went still. Grant met her gaze, calm, unmoved. I was invited, he said. Vanessa's jaw tightened. By who? Another pause, not long, but long enough to feel deliberate. Then one of the senior directors spoke. The oversight committee requested his presence. Vanessa's eyes flicked back, and why would they do that? No one answered immediately, because the answer wasn't simple, and it wasn't something she had been prepared for. Grant leaned back slightly in his chair, still calm, still composed. Then, for the first time since entering the room, he spoke again. "Because some of those contracts," he said quietly, "run through entities that require my approval." The words didn't land all at once. They spread. Across the table, through the silence, into every space Vanessa thought she controlled. Logan's head turned sharply toward Grant. "What entities?" he demanded. Grant didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Vanessa. "The ones you didn't ask about," he said. Vanessa's breath caught, just for a second. Because suddenly, pieces that never mattered before started to move. Small things, ignored details, questions she never thought to ask. And they weren't random anymore. They were connected. She straightened slowly, trying to regain ground, trying to hold on to something solid. "You're not part of this structure," she said. Grant's expression didn't change. "No," he agreed. And then, that's the problem. Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. Because for the first time since she handed him those papers, Vanessa wasn't the one controlling what came next, and she knew it. She just didn't know how far it went. Not yet. The silence after the meeting didn't end when people stood up. It followed Vanessa out of the room. By the time the internal investigation formally began, the narrative she had built was already unraveling. The vendor approvals, the structured payments, the signatures she once saw as routine now sat under scrutiny. Not criminal, not yet, but enough to trigger a full review by the board. Logan didn't last the week. His access was suspended first, then his title. By the end of the next board session, he was gone entirely, escorted out through a side exit, his reputation collapsing faster than he could defend it. The company framed it as a necessary transition in leadership alignment. Vanessa wasn't removed, not immediately, but the shift was clear. Oversight committees tightened around her decisions. External auditors were brought in. The same board members who once deferred to her now questioned every move with measured caution. Control had become conditional, and for the first time, she understood what it felt like to be watched instead of trusted. The divorce process moved forward at the same time, but it no longer looked like the clean exit she had imagined. Victoria Lawson handled everything with precision. Every asset was accounted for. Every financial record was examined. Every assumption Vanessa had made about Grant's position dissolved piece by piece. The commercial properties he owned before their marriage. The long-term investments she had never asked about. The consulting structures tied to Northbridge Infrastructure Partners. The approvals that ran quietly through layers she never saw, and then the final layer, the one she couldn't argue with. Grant wasn't just financially independent. He was the controlling stakeholder behind a series of infrastructure deals that directly intersected with Sterling Meridian Group's expansion strategy. Not visible, not public, but undeniable. By the time the settlement terms were finalized, the balance of power had fully shifted. Grant didn't demand everything. He didn't need to. The structure of what he already controlled made sure of that. The final agreement left Vanessa with far less leverage than she expected. Financially stable, yes, but exposed, constrained, and under scrutiny in ways she had never planned for. It wasn't destruction, it was consequence. The last time they saw each other wasn't in a courtroom. It was in a quiet conference room, final documents laid out between them, no raised voices, no accusations, just the weight of everything that had already happened. Vanessa looked at him differently now, not with anger, not even with pride, but with something closer to clarity. "I didn't know," she said. Grant nodded once. "I know." There was a pause, long enough to matter. "I thought I understood who you were," she added. Grant's expression didn't change. "You understood what you needed me to be," he said. It wasn't cruel, it was accurate, and that made it harder to respond to. Vanessa looked down at the papers, then back at him. "You could have told me." Grant let the words sit for a moment. "I could have," he said, "but that wouldn't have changed what you were looking for." She didn't argue, because now she knew. It hadn't been about information, it had been about value. And she had decided his too early. They signed, no hesitation, no second chances. When Grant walked out of that room, he didn't feel like he had won. There was no triumph in it, just quiet. A kind of stillness he hadn't felt in years. In the months that followed, he didn't step into the spotlight. He didn't correct public narratives. He didn't rebuild anything that needed recognition. He moved into a smaller place by choice this time. Clean, quiet, his. He continued his work through the same networks, the same structures, but without the weight of being unseen inside his own life. There were no dramatic announcements, no final reveals to the world, because the people who needed to know already did, and the one person who hadn't had learned too late. Vanessa remained at Sterling Meridian Group, but not as the same person who once believed she controlled everything around her. The scrutiny stayed, the pressure stayed, and so did the awareness of what she had lost. Not just power, not just stability, but the one person who had never asked her to prove anything. Grant didn't look back, not because he was angry, but because he no longer needed to, and that was the part she couldn't undo. He didn't win because he was richer. He won because he never needed her to see his value to know it was there. If you've ever seen someone too late or been seen too late yourself, share your thoughts below.